Tomorrow's annular eclipse has created a lot of excitement for those in its path. The eclipse will be seen across multiple cities in the western part of the country, allowing millions to witness the Ring of Fire.
But what makes the eclipse so special? Joining us now to discuss is the author of Answers Unleashed and former NASA rocket scientist Olympia LePoint. Olympia, thank you for being with us as a renowned rocket scientist. How awesome is that? People are like, oh, you're a rocket scientist? You can say yes. How have you been prepping for this eclipse? Will you actually be going out to try to see it?
That is a great question. Solar eclipse actually happen quite frequently, but it depends on where you're located. This particular annular eclipse is going to happen in the western part of the United States. And what I'm doing is preparing our audience to know what to look for and how to protect themselves when they look at the particular eclipse. We're going to see this annular eclipse come from the Oregon area and pass through the southern part of the United States, Texas, and it's going to be quite a fascinating event. And I'm getting on TV programs just informing the public of exactly what to expect.
It is so exciting because people will travel wherever they need to be at times, sometimes across the globe, to be able to capture and be there in person. We're talking about, an annular eclipse. Some people have seen a total eclipse, but there is a difference. Can you talk about what we're going to be watching when it comes particularly to the annular eclipse and what makes that one so special?
That's such a great question. There's a difference between a total eclipse and an annular eclipse. A total eclipse is when the moon and the sun align and you can't see the sun past the moon. So that's a total eclipse. But the annular eclipse is when the moon is the farthest distance away from the earth. And when the moon and the sun start to align, because the moon is not going to cover the full sun, you're going to see this ring around the moon, and that's that ring that we see. That's an annular type of eclipse, and that happens when this particular Earth is in the way of the shadow. It's the shadow that's happening from the moon, and that is our total pathway, our totality of our pathway of what allows us to be able to see the eclipse on Earth. And so there's a big difference between the total eclipse and the annular eclipse, and what we're going to experience is that ring of fire tomorrow.
And Olympia, let's talk more about that shadow that you had mentioned, right? If you're in that path of annularity, you may be able to see this shadow. We talked about what you can see, ring of fire. What about feeling? Is there going to be maybe a temperature drop at all?
Yeah, that's a great observation. If there's cloud cover, chances are you're not going to be able to see the eclipse per se, but you're going to feel it. There is NASA scientists that has been able to determine that the temperature usually drops a good 20 degrees Fahrenheit when the eclipse happens. And if there's different type of cloud cover, you're going to feel a significant drop in temperature as well as a drop in pressure. Now, if we think about this, the moon is responsible with the gravitational forces that allows the ocean to have its waves. And so there's a big temperature and big pressure as a pressure form with the moon movement. And that gravitational force is going to cause the temperature to drop as well as cause the pressure to change only for a slight period of time, anywhere between 30 seconds and a couple of minutes, and then it's going to resume back to normal.
So fascinating how it's all connected. And I want to ask you before we leave you, because you guys are able to look far in advance to say and to help us plan when the next event will happen. How are you able to do that? How are you able to track not only when the eclipses will happen, but who will be able to get underneath that really important path?
The eclipse actually happen quite frequently, but it depends on where you are. Like, for example, I just had a lunch with my friends that are going back to the UK, and they're not going to see our eclipse because our eclipse the eclipse tomorrow is specifically happening over just a portion of the United States. But the eclipse happened various places across the Earth, and that's simply where the moon blocks the sun, and that shadow casts down on the Earth. And depending on where the moon is and where the sun is where that eclipse is going to happen. So the eclipse happen quite regularly, but it depends on where you are on this Earth that will tell you when you're going to see it.
It's fascinating to see and witness, and we're going to be covering it tomorrow for sure. Author of Answers Unleashed and former NASA rocket scientist Olympia LePoint, thank you for joining us here on Fox Weather.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.